Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
With the 2020 election around the corner, Biden and Trump are making their case to voters. The key is who they are making their case to. People almost take it for granted now, but white evangelicals were not always on Trump's side. When did they start supporting him, and why? The answer brings with it a story that goes much deeper than the 2020 election, and it's something near and dear to Lance and me. And that's the divide between the coasts and middle America. Ultimately, it's something that everybody hopefully listening should care about, and people you know should care about. Even if you're not a politics person, you care about this because, again, as we mentioned, it's so much deeper than just politics. It speaks to part of all this tension that everybody's felt for the last number of years here in this country, and that's something that Lance and I care quite a bit about. So today we're going to examine the story of what changed. Why did white evangelicals join and start supporting Trump in 2016, and why are they excited now as opposed to merely willing to support him? Why are they excited in 2020? That's what we're going to look at. But of course, we couldn't begin a conversation on politics and white evangelicals without
True Chat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Like we said, Justin, you talked about the divide, and this is whether it's between races or gender or ages. This is another one of the divides that really frustrates us because we all live in this great country and we all are American citizens and we all should just care for each other and be there for one another. And we all want the same things. And that is the freedom to live our life the way we would like to live it. But we can't do that when we're so worried about everybody else. And this is just another one of those divides between the coast and middle America that further makes it difficult for us to come together as a nation and solve problems.
And I think that speaks to, Lance, in 2016, right? I mean, as you and I covered that election, and we talked about it a lot on this program, and there was a lot of surprises, obviously, for a number of people. But part of what I think we forget too often is that there were major surprises inside the Republican Party itself, right? Because we look at Iowa, one of the first places that was voting, and only 11% of Republicans caucused for Trump in Iowa. But when November came, they stood by him in huge numbers. 81% of their area voted for him. And so did 81% of evangelical voters nationwide. So you went from 11% to 81% in truly a matter of months, right? I mean, not very much time. So how did that happen? Why did that happen? Well, Lance is going to share with you the article that we've talked a little bit about. It's very lengthy. Lance and I will tell you that. It is from the New York Times. And even though Lance and I don't always like everything the New York Times does, I think we were both pleased that they chose to do this article and do it in length because they gave a lot of opportunity for all of these people that feel this way about Trump, feel very strongly about him, to voice their opinion. And if you know the standard demographic of the New York Times, it's good that they've done that because hopefully that's one of those things, hopefully, that's going to bring some additional understanding. I just wanted to mention, Lance, because I think it's important, right, that whether or not we realize it, in many of our elections, religion plays a huge role. Even if you're not yourself religious, there's a lot of voters out there that are going to vote based on what they think is the best thing for their religion or the thing that advances their religion the most. Or if they feel like, and this is the key for today, right, that their way of life, and if religion's very important to them, then perhaps their religion itself is under attack. So tell us a little bit about what do we learn from this article?
Well, the writer goes back to January of 2016 to a speech that President Trump gave in Sioux Center, Iowa. And as you said, he only ended up with 11% of the caucus in this county. But interestingly, it's one of his more famous speeches because during it, he gives the line that he said, quote, "I can stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters." And that was replayed time and time again and has been over the last 4 years. But what the audience that was there heard was a totally different message. And it is, quote, I will tell you, this is President Trump speaking, I will tell you, Christianity is under tremendous siege, whether we want to talk about it or we don't talk about it, Mr. Trump said. And the people in the room were just taken with that because that's the way they feel. They feel like they were living their life and they had been under attack for their beliefs and for their lifestyle. And here was somebody who was speaking up for them. And President Trump went on to say, and yet we don't exert the power that we should have. And he said, if I am elected president, quote, Christianity will have power. If I'm there, you're going to have plenty of power. You don't need anybody else. You're going to have somebody representing you very, very well. Remember that. And that's what spoke to those people because
that's what they remembered, right?
That's what they remember from this.
And I think, Lance, that's really key. Okay. This whole idea, right? That's what they take away from it, because so often it feels like the rest of the world's taking away this completely different message. And what was important to them, what they were hearing, right? That was something different. And these are not, these are people from all these different backgrounds too. It's not like they were, just one particular set of people doing one particular set of job. And I think that's part of what's telling about this, that thing that they take away something so different. It shows you what they were focused on, what was important to them.
And the article goes on to then talk to a variety of people, a 50-something family, a 30-something family, so an older family, a younger family. And very simply, it was just the fact that, you can say that these people, didn't like him at first and weren't really, they just kind of wanted to listen to him because they come from a town of 7,500 people. And, here was somebody running for president speaking in their town. And so they all went there, either supporting Ted Cruz or Ben Carson or somebody else. But when it was all said and done and Trump ended up with the nomination in the Republican Party and he was going against Hillary Clinton, for them, it was very simple then who to vote for. And they were very open with the writer that they don't, really believe that Trump has led the best life as far as their values are concerned, being divorced multiple times, supposedly, having issues with women and how he treats them. They said, yeah, all of those things they don't like about President Trump, but they really like the fact that he said he would stand up for them and that he would protect their way of life because they feel, rightly or wrongly, that's not, that's part of the issue, I guess. But as far as this part of it, the show's concerned, whether they're right or wrong, they felt like their lifestyle was under attack in the 8 years before the 2016 election. And now, after 4 years of Trump, it goes on to talk to them how they feel now. And they are even more supportive of him now because they feel safe. They feel safe in their beliefs. They feel safe that they're not under attack. They feel safe that they can continue to live their life the way they want to as American citizens, as long as Donald Trump is the president. And so that's kind of the change that took place. They even mentioned a couple of them held their nose when they voted for him, but at least he was going to support the way they wanted to live. And they were fearful that they might lose that.
The author of the article, Lance, actually writes, and it kind of sums up, I think, what you're saying pretty well, or at least builds on it. Evangelicals did not support Mr. Trump in spite of who he is. They supported him because of who he is and because of who they are. He is their protector, the bully who is on their side, the one who offered safety amid their fears that their country as they know it and their place in it, and I think that's a key, is changing and changing quickly. White, straight, married couples with children who go to church regularly are no longer the American mainstream. An entire way of life, one in which their values were dominant, could be headed for extinction. And Mr. Trump, offered to restore them to power as though they have not been in power all along.
And you can argue that they're not correct, that their values are still the mainstream and that they're not headed for extinction. But the fact is, perception is reality. And that is the perception under which they are living, which then causes them to act out in this way by supporting President Trump. So don't get lost in the minutia of wanting to argue that they don't have any validity to feel this way. Accept the fact that they do feel this way, because it will help you as you listen to the show, that that's not the important part, is whether they're right or wrong in their fears. The point is they feel that way, just like when we feel a certain way, whether we're rational or not, or whether we're right or not, our feelings drive us to make decisions. And so their feelings have to be validated, and they are in their support for President Trump because he's supporting them.
Now, we reach a wide range of listeners, Lance, right? We got people listening to this program probably right now on the East Coast. We got them listening in Middle America, throughout the Midwest, all over the place. And I think hopefully what all of you are taking home from this is going to be some, hopefully there's some self-recognition here, some self-analysis of maybe you've never said these things, but have you thought these things? Because this next one is something that Lance and I have touched on a few episodes before, but it's kind of what we're examining next, because it's the thing to me, Lance. I told you when I read this part of the article, it was like, it's hitting the nail on the head. Jason Mulder, he's a gentleman that runs a design company in Sioux Center, the place the article focuses on, Lance. And he says, quote, "I feel like on the coasts, in some of the cities and stuff, they look down on us in rural America. We're a bunch of hicks and we don't know anything. They don't understand us the same way we don't understand them. So we don't want them telling us how to live our lives." And that right there, folks, as I've said a few times, that's why this election isn't over yet, because these people feel that way very strongly. And they've become convinced not only now that Trump was the right choice, but that he's the only choice to keep looking out for them, right? And that's what we have to talk about. That is there a way around that? And what's the harm being done by both sides? Because this is not a one-sided thing. Both sides are doing this. We're getting into this divisiveness here. What's at the core of this, and how do we combat it? Why is it there in the first place? To find out, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Jason Mulder said, "You joke that we don't get it. Well, you don't get it either. We're not speaking the same language." He said that as he was talking to the New York Times reporter that wrote this piece that we're referencing today. It's linked to thestateofus.org. We're talking about the 2020 election. It's right around the corner. Biden and Trump making their cases to voters. Ultimately, though, we kind of take for granted, right, that Trump has this white evangelical base that's supporting him. And it's always kind of been, I think, this mismatch that the mainstream media has not understood, right? They don't make sense of it. There's theories and rationalizations out the wazoo, and the article actually mentions a few of them. Some of them include that evangelical support was purely transactional, that they saw him as their best chance in decades to end legalized abortion, that the opportunity to nominate conservative justices to the Supreme Court was paramount, that they hated Hillary Clinton or felt torn to pick the lesser of two evils, that they held their noses and voted hoping he would advance their policy priorities and accomplish their goals. But the article contends, Lance, that while some of those may be true, right, they might have played a role, ultimately it came to having somebody that they felt was going to fight for them, right? And fight is the key word here, because we're not talking about stand up. We're talking about fight, right? Get in there, rile things up a little bit, push people out of the way that aren't going to be on your side, and go get some stuff done. As you talked about, they felt like this got eroded, right, in the 8 years prior to Trump, and possibly even longer than that. I mean, I think there were a couple people in the article, Lance, right, that felt like it wasn't even just Democrat presidents. They felt like some Republican presidents possibly in recent years too have done the same thing, maybe not to the same extent, but haven't been perfect either in terms of doing this. So they've been feeling this they've been feeling threatened, right, for a while. Again, whether or not that fear of being threatened is legitimate, it's legitimate in the fact that they're feeling it, right? We can talk about whether or not they should feel it, but they're feeling that. And as the author points out, that is the reality. I mean, straight white couples that go to church regularly on Sundays is no longer the norm in America. Now, is it still the largest single group of people? Probably, but it's not the majority any longer. And so there is at least a legitimate point there on that is changing. Whether or not they need to fear that, that's part of what we want to talk about now.
My first point is that there is in my mind, there is a finite amount of political power. And that is in the United States. We have X amount of power. And as these other groups ask to have a seat at the table, which I believe they should have a seat at the table and more of a say, that power has to come from somewhere. And so I believe that's why these folks feel like they're under attack and their way of life is under attack, because quite frankly, they have lost some power as we have seen gender biases erode and Black Lives Matter and all of these other equality groups have been taking place, not just in the last 6 months, but over the last 30 or 40, 50 years even as well. And so obviously I think that's where their feeling comes from, that they're losing power, is that they are, because they are, even though they are still, as you point out, probably the largest group in America, they are by no means the only group, and they're not the only group with a voice. Now, secondly, just for transparency, these are the people that I grew up with. I was from the state of Missouri, just once, a little bit south of where this story is taken, and grew up in a family where you went to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, just like it talks about in this article. When I was 12, my family moved away to the big city of Columbus, Ohio. And I still go back home, and I've had many talks on the front porch on Sunday afternoons and evenings talking about these culture, for lack of a better word, these culture wars that we talk about with my cousins, and I understand, I guess, why people don't understand them, but I want to say this on their behalf because I don't agree with them. In many of my discussions with them on the different social issues that they take a very hard line on, I don't agree. Yet we continue to love one another and meet and see each other. And I will say, in my 60 years of life, I've never seen any of my relatives turn anybody away who is in need. They will take them in, they will feed them, they will clothe them. Now, they might then at that point say, you know what? I think you need to straighten up your life and live your life more like X and teach them their beliefs. But I've never seen them turn their back on anyone. And that's the point that I want to make, that I want people on the coast who have never experienced middle America to take from it. While you may not agree with their white Judeo-Christian morals on your social issues, understand at the base, these are good people who want to live their life the way they want to live it and are willing to help others. And that's where we have, I think, the divide, and we get into the argument and we lose the face that what's important is that we all just learn to get along, that this country is big enough and that this country gives us the right to live our lives the way we want to live our lives, as long as we don't take those rights away from others. And so that's just because I feel differently than you doesn't mean that I don't think you have the right to live your life the way you see fit, as long as you're not harming others. And therein, I think, is the point that we miss as a nation when we talk about this divide between middle America and the coastal divisions.
And I struggle with it a lot, Lance, for a number of reasons. And I'm going to try to share a couple because, we can't, Lance and I could share these backstories, I think, a long time. And I think they're really relevant. We're taking part of the show today to do that. And usually Lance and I don't dive into this stuff and explain that backstory. But I think that today, more than ever, it's important because we both live in the Midwest, right? We're talking about these parts of the country. Now, granted, Ohio, most of Ohio is not quite maybe, I don't want to use the word extreme because I think it comes with negative connotations, maybe not as devout perhaps, or as dedicated to some of these ideals as these people in Sioux Center, Iowa are, or where Lance grew up in Missouri. So that important note, but we're also still part of that area of the country that the coast looked down on. And part of, I think, why we're running into this, Lance, is what you said is, you should have the right to live your life the way you want, as long as it doesn't prevent somebody from living their life the way they want. And that right there is the crux of what we've got caught up in, because the contention has been to have one, you can't have the other. In other words, only one group's going to get what it wants. So it's either us or them. And we're going to talk about in the third segment why I think Lance and I believe that most of the time that is a false sentiment, and it's a very dangerous one that leads us into bad places. And Lance shared his story, and I'll share mine quickly. I grew up here in Urbana, Ohio, where we're broadcasting from. And we're about 45 minutes from Columbus, 45 minutes from Dayton. So we're not, crazy rural. It's not like you have to drive 100 miles to get to a major city or anything like that. Urbana's got 12,000 people. So it's, is it a big town? Absolutely not. Is it a, dirt road with one stoplight? It's not that either. It's definitely on the small end, but it's not crazy small. Growing up thinking I was straight, figuring out later that I wasn't, right? I started before I had acknowledged that myself, and I was looking into, trying to find other people like me. Well, a lot of the people that I ran into were people that were growing up or living on the coast, and they kept perpetrating this idea to me that I should be afraid, right? Because of where I lived, that I was at risk. And I want to say that definitely does exist. Okay. I'm not discounting that at all. I'm fortunate that wasn't the case for me. I know it's the case for a lot of people. So that's part of why I struggle with it, because it's definitely a mixed bag. And that's where we pick out these examples, right, of when the bad happens. And then we say, that's how it is everywhere. And what Lance and I are sharing with you is, that's not what our experience have been. Doesn't mean people haven't had those experiences, right? Doesn't mean I haven't had people that have been mean to me. But on the whole, that's not what I've gone through. I ran for mayor recently, and I was not as concerned as my husband was about what was going to happen when somebody like me ran for mayor, right? In a town like this, in a place that, by the way, our congressman is Jim Jordan. For those of you that know who that is, it may either be a really good thing or a really bad thing. But either way, it carries hopefully some weight in a county that went for Trump 80-20, right? So just keeping these in mind about the type of place that we're in here. And part of what Lance has really stuck with me is when we looked at the final votes, right? Over half of the people that voted for me were people that voted for Trump. And that, I don't know how it's hard to reconcile that, because what we're taught is that shouldn't be possible, right? That because you've got somebody that wants to run as an independent and has some ideas from both sides, that people like the people that vote for Trump can't vote for you. And it's just not true. We just watched it happen. I didn't win. I lost by 200 votes, but over half of those people that voted for me voted for Trump in 2016, and they're probably going to vote for him again in 2020. And that's what today's episode's about, is understanding that it's not the nice, neat lines the media is drawing for us and that our leaders draw for us. And that's what we're talking about coming up. What are those lines, and why did they do this? Why do they try to lead us to believe that it's this nice, simple, neat box that we can tie this bow on and say, this is what it is, and everybody know it, and we can all stick each other in these boxes? Why do they try to do that? To find out, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Lance, the 2020 election's around the corner. We've been talking about it a little bit. We're going to be talking about it more, I think, right, as time goes on here.
It's coming.
It's coming. And there's a lot that goes into it this year, as there is every year. But boy, is this a strange year, right? We got a pandemic going on. We've got Joe Biden as the front runner for the Democratic Party, the former vice president under President Obama, the guy that was before Trump. There's a lot that weaves into all this, right? And then you've got Trump. I mean, can't leave him out. The comeback kid, or whatever you want to call him, from the 2016 election, the guy that everybody thought, didn't have a chance. And here he is, the president of the United States, working on his second term, or trying to work on his second term.
Well, and as this article points out, most people didn't give Trump a chance in the Republican nomination process. And then when he came out of nowhere, so to speak, and got the nomination, nobody gave him a snowball's chance of actually winning the election. So, I mean, he's been an uphill battle in his entire political life this last 4 years.
And so this brings us to this part, Lance, of that mismatch, right? We were all told it wouldn't happen, couldn't happen, right? Trump can't be president. And then middle America stood up and said, we're still here. And by the way, we make up a big part of the Electoral College, and you need us to win the presidency. So we'll show you just how much you're wrong. And that's what they did. And that's why we've had President Trump for the last almost 4 years now. And that's part of why we're talking about this today, because it's become clearer and clearer. More things have developed over the last 4 years, at least for me, that have kind of illuminated the lampposts along the street and are showing us this path of why Trump's where he is and why these people feel so strongly about supporting him. And we've talked some about that already. So we're not going to focus quite so much on that now, but we're going to focus on what to me, Lance, I think gets us back to the core of the issue of why is this happening in the first place? Why are we becoming divided? Because you and I both shared examples of people can disagree, but still care about each other, right? And still live even in the same family, and even in the same town. And so why is there this mismatch between what we see and then what we keep getting told? That, people who don't like that Black Lives Matters protests are immediately racist, or people that, do support Black Lives Matter, right, also support violence. Both of which, as we've talked about on different shows, simply not true. Now it could be, right, because it's never always and never, never, but most of the time, neither of those things are the case. And that's where we have this breaking point. And that, to me, Lance, as I've mentioned on the show before, and I think we're going to mention again now, the people that make the decisions on both sides, Democrats, Republicans, our leaders, and the media, it benefits them for us to fight, for us to believe that middle America on the whole, right, is X, and the coasts on the whole is Y, right? That benefits them. The more they can squish us into these little boxes, the more they can tell us who we are and what we think, the more they upset us, and the more upset we get at the other people who believe what they've been told about us. To me, Lance, that's the biggest danger, because that's how we got Trump, right? That's why we have him, is because we've become so fearful of one another. You don't end up with somebody like Trump. You don't end up with people feeling like that's their only choice if you don't get to this point where you feel completely disrespected.
Well, I think we've become so polarized that everything, and I don't know if it's social media or it's the way we've raised our children or what it is, as the older person here in this room, I don't know why it's gotten that way, but it's us versus them in everything. It seems like, in almost every aspect of life, it's an us versus them mentality. And sometimes you're in the us camp and sometimes you're in the them camp, based on what you believe. I mean, I know that, I feel like I'm in both of those sometimes, with my beliefs. And it's like, no, I'm not in any of those camps. Don't put me in that box. I'm not an us or a them. I'm just me. And I have my beliefs and I have the way I want to live my life, but I want to help people. I want to do good things. I want to help those in need. And do I think that people might be better off if they lived the way I did? Sure. And if they're interested in it, I'll explain to them why I do what I do. But if they choose to reject it, it doesn't mean that they're any less of a human being. And I need to then perpetuate that love and concern for another human being. And unfortunately, I see it, and this might be an old man bias, I see it in social media that everybody, like you said, has that phone, they have a voice, or they can take a picture, and then that becomes viral. It becomes something that so many people see, then they make that the truth. They make the truth that, oh, these people feel like you said, X, these people feel like Y. And people are complex. We're not simple. Human beings are not simple beings. We are very complex. We can have a variety of, it's like, I drive my pickup truck and love musicals. I mean, I drive, I drive a muscle car and wear a bow tie. I mean, that's me. That's who I am. You can't put me in one box. I'm a total, and I think that's the way everybody is, but that's too hard to cover in the media. So we're going to put everything and make it simple. And then you can decide, are you going to be with us or are you going to be with them? And then we'll fight for your control so that we can have the most power. And we've got to stop that. As a people, we have the power to stop it. That's what's great about this country is we live in a democracy, and the power doesn't rest with the media. The power doesn't rest with the politicians. The power rests with us, the people of this country, and we can take it back and we can make the difference. We can just start treating each other like human beings and showing the love and respect that we should have for each other. And all of that's protected in the Constitution. And then we would make these outside powers fold to us instead of us evolve into them.
Well, you said it pretty well. I a few people have told me, the state of us, you and Lance don't go at it too often anymore. And I said, well, I think part of that's not that Lance and I don't disagree on things. That part of it has to do with the way that we choose to disagree on things. And what I mean by that is not that the beliefs are any different than they've ever been, simply that it doesn't have to be this, you get all mad and get all angry and get all upset at one another, because the problem is that when you get into that state, and I just feel like we're, beating the broken drum here, Lance, or something, because we've said it so many times. I just hope it's getting through to people that you all out there can share it with others, because it is growing, right? I mean, we're reaching more people, Lance, probably than we've ever reached. We keep reaching more, and that's wonderful. And we thank our audience for that. But you have a responsibility to go out there and tell people this, because we cannot let them to continue to believe the falsehoods that they're being sold by so many.
I think what's happened, and I'm going to let you continue, but I just want to interrupt here. I think the way I would put it very simply for folks, you and I have a mutual respect for one another. And that's what we need to carry into society and our relationships with everybody that we meet. If we would start from that groundwork, that we have a mutual respect for one another as human beings, then we can take care of all of these other issues that we're seeing in society. And you may think that I'm beating the drum and kumbaya, and I'm not, Justin, I'm not that way. I don't believe in that at all, but I think it's that simple that you have to treat others with a mutual respect. It's very simple. We were taught as little kids, or at least I was, treat others as you would like to be treated. And I'll get out and let you finish, but I think I wanted people to know why we disagree the way we disagree. And I think it's that simple thing, basic human understanding of respect for one another.
Well, I think the other thing is too, when you bring that mutual respect, you'll realize, I think you'll find that you agree on so much more than you disagree on. And that's part of what I think has happened on this show, and hopefully happens with our listeners. Hopefully what they start to see is that you start to focus on, here's all these things that we're on the same page about, right? That we can get something done on, instead of focusing on the narrower set of things that we're not on the same page on. Because that's part of, as Lance has said, that's part of what this country's all about. And that's part of the mistake where when we listen to media, and I don't mean, when I say media, let's just be clear, I'm not talking about just cable news, okay? I for our younger listeners out there, I'm talking about social media as well, because it's easy to pick out these things that are not the way everything is. And that's like, Lance, when you were talking about the different things you do. One of the reasons I love your opening, right? Your friendly redneck liberal. It's like, what the hell does that mean? You know, that's the whole point, folks. That's the point, is that should be a contradiction. It is a contradiction, and yet it still exists, and it exists more than you would think. If we brought out most mainstream media reporters, they would cover Lance, right? Out mowing his 2 acres, driving his truck, right? And they might leave out the parts about the way that he's opted to teach class, or the fact that he wears a bow tie, or the fact that he covers a musical. Why? Because that doesn't make sense. And people say, well, gee, that kind of doesn't fit with what, you know, I think that somebody living in a little place like Lance lives. That's not how those people behave. There's no way that you could have people like that, right? And it's like, no, that's part of what's wrong, is realizing that, you know, diversity does come in all sorts of different ways. Yes, in the ways that we typically think of, right? Race, orientation, the male, female, those sorts of things. Sure. But it also comes in the fact that we all grow up differently. We all have different life experiences that bring us to where we are. And that's what we lose sight of, because we allow, as Lance was highlighting, we allow the media and our leaders, who know that it benefits them, to boil us down to those things. We play into it. And sometimes most of the time it's not on purpose, right? We pull this thing on social media and it's like, oh, look what I saw, right? And then the people that see it just consume it. So you have 2 responsibilities here, 2 things to go away with, hopefully. One, right, is don't be the people that spread that without providing some context. Where did you take it? What else did you see when you were there? Don't just do things like that. Please don't put things out there and not do a little digging yourself for the context. It only takes a few seconds. I'm not telling you got to write a 2,000-piece story, 2,000-word story like we got here in the New York Times, but do give a little bit of background if you would, please, because at the same time, Urbana just had a Black Lives Matter protest where the chief of police, Lance, was marching at the front of the protest, right? In small town, rural Ohio. Okay. So again, it can happen. We have to be more aware of when it happens. And that's the key. So if you're on the sending end of information, try to provide some context. And if you're on the receiving end, that question everything, right? That's Lance's classroom philosophy, hopefully. So those are the 2 things. Super easy. They're not that difficult to do, but please start doing them. And the third thing, I told you there were 2, but there's 3, Lance, right? Yeah. Is to tell people a little bit about why we're doing what we're doing here on all of our shows at True Chat, and also how to get the word out. So what are those, Lance?
Well, that's a good Baptist sermon right there. You got to have 3 points in your sermon.
3 points.
So your third point. Well, our mission here at True Chat is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And you can get the word out and tell people to listen to us. And they say, well, yeah, but how do I find the State of Us? Well, you can tell them. They can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our recording producer, Devin McCain, and our editing producer, Bradley Butch. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.